there, and welcome to the podcast. Today, we have Amanda Polich on the podcast. I'm really excited to talk to her. You know, my journey with joining the Recovering Out Loud movement and basically shucking off the shame and stigma that I was carrying around, even though I'd been sober a long time, you know, happened really after a Dare to Lead training that I took with a Dare to Lead certified facilitator named Susan Mann. And anyway, here's Amanda, who is also a certified Dare to Lead facilitator, and there's not a lot of them. So they're, you know, very skilled, and you know, I know Dare to Lead material pretty well, so it's just a natural. And we met via LinkedIn. She's also in recovery, and she's doing great work at a company called UKG. So with that, we'll get to the conversation. So welcome, Amanda. Our paths have intersected through the magic of LinkedIn with some shared connections. And, you know, LinkedIn said, we think you should connect with Amanda. So I did. I poked the button, says connect, and here we are. And we've had one conversation already. For my listening audience, would you be willing to introduce yourself and say whatever you'd like about yourself as we move into the conversation?
Yeah, sure. No, thanks, Brett. Yeah, I do love the power of LinkedIn and getting connected to people with shared, visions and mindsets and doing things. You talked about people who are doing things and just not talking about it. And so I appreciate you reaching out and having that connection. Yeah, my name's Amanda Polich. I wear a few hats, I guess. I work for a company called UKG. We do payroll, HR, culture, software. It's a job I'm really passionate about. I'm a leader within our organization, connecting with clients and trying to retain them and, keep them happy and optimize their software. What I love most about that job, I get to have, conversations with clients about their people every day. And I would say, another hat that I wear is I'm a certified Dare to Lead facilitator, studied under Dr. Brené Brown, and facilitate her work on the side, both internally in our organization and externally, and love being a part of that because it keeps me on the pulse of leadership and having really authentic conversations, to just get better each day. And so I like that piece. And I'm currently wrapping up a 2-year stint as the board chair for the Council on Recovery here in Houston. It's about a $10 million organization with 100 employees. And that has really, I don't know, taken all the things that I work on and put them into motion. It's an interesting, this is a working board. It's not you're just here for good looks or a pocketbook, but really doing things to impact changes in the Houston community. And then I volunteer in other capacities as well. But that has, as I've said, I've given that a lot of time over the past 2 years, but the learnings as it relates to, Dare to Lead and my work life and, going through changes, what I've been given has been tremendous from that opportunity. So that's a little about me. I live in Houston, Texas. I have 2 daughters. They're 28 and 29 at this point. I have a couple of grandkids now. I had one and I just got another one. And so when you have more, there's more ability to hang out with them and watch them. So that's fun.
Wonderful. That's a great start. Thank you for sharing that. So as I mentioned to you in the past, right, one of the reasons that I've gotten loud and become a recovering out loud person is because of Brené Brown. Like I took a Dare to Lead class. I think you were both connected to Susan Mann. You know Susan, right?
Yep, I know
Yeah.
Susan well.
Yeah, she's in my neighborhood. She's actually right here in
Oh, I
Washington.
love that. Oh, say hi.
Yeah. Well, I think she listens to this. So Susan, hi.
Hi, Susan.
Yeah. So yeah. So, going through that training, in my corporate world, I'd been sober about 8 years without a single person knowing that I was, well, maybe a couple, 3, right? Not many though. And I was navigating quietly. And there's this recovering out loud movement that I became interested in. And that this idea of going into the arena, this idea of showing up and being seen, and having courage, even though it's going to mean I'm going to get my ass kicked a few times, probably,
Mhm.
launched me into this new world. So I say all that because I'm trying to lead toward, I'd love for you to share a little bit about your sobriety journey, because I know that the Recovery Council, and I want to talk about that too, but you share the same affliction that I do, correct? And would you be willing to share that with my listening audience?
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, I'm just nodding and smiling because a lot of similarities on my side as well. And I love to hear that, right? I love to hear that. And I have been sober for almost 11 years, 11 years in November. And like you, Brett, I mean, I kind of lived these dual lives. It was kind of interesting. They say drinking is the only thing that you get harassed by quitting. No one ever says, "Oh, you have to have that donut." Or maybe they do, but there's, especially in a client facing role in the software business. It's like, we're out at industry events in Vegas, and, everything surrounds alcohol, and taking clients to dinner and hosting them. And so, really, the first 5 years of my journey, and even here at UKG, I was pretty silent about my recovery. I had my recovery life and I had my work life, and I didn't want to talk about them. And what I've known through some work and lots of work years later is that was all the shame around being an alcoholic and what that looks like. And people just finally figured out I didn't drink. I never really talked about why. And, quite frankly, most people didn't ask me why. And so that was one lesson. People just don't care as much unless they have an issue. But so I kind of went on my separate way, and we talked about Dare to Lead and Brené's work. But when I got sober, I started following her work, and it really was, everything came out like when I needed to hear it, especially in my career and getting in the arena and getting out there. And I started following what she was saying. And when she called for facilitators, it was in conjunction of, hey, no matter what the outcome is, I'm going to get in the arena. No matter, I'm going to be me and get in the arena, no matter the outcome. So I thought, I'm going to apply for this. Like I didn't have some of the things she was looking for, but I had leadership and I was in the business world. And I think she wanted to see this program get infiltrated within, the corporate community. And so I thought, I'm going to get in the arena. I got accepted in. At the same time, kind of, on those roads, I was a board member at the Council on Recovery, and the board chair asked me if I would chair a luncheon. We have two luncheons every year. We bring in big names, big speakers, Rob Lowe, Andrew McCarthy. He was the year that I did it. And people really share a little bit of their story on stage. And I finally thought, you know what? I'm going to go big or go home. There's 1,000 people in this room. I'm going to invite my boss and my coworkers, and I'm going to share a little bit about my story. I was tired of living two lives. I lived two lives. And since that point, I got vocal about it. And because what I know for sure is like, there's a solution and people can recover, and there's people inside our organizations that are suffering. And I'm passionate about business, and I'm passionate about healthy communities, and getting sober is one of those things. And so, since that point, I would say that I've recovered out loud. I started a group here at UKG for a sober community. We're small but mighty, but had the backing from our leadership here to do that. There's some work to be done, but that's really where I think about recovery today. And it's all of those intersections that we talked about of things to just come together in the right spot, whether we talk about our higher power or the universe, or I just think the stars aligned. And I'm really grateful for that, because the amount of people that I've gotten to connect with. And we had Brené Brown speak at our last luncheon this past spring. And what was amazing about that is she told this room, we had 1,500 people in the room for Brené. She said, if you're a business, you should hire somebody in recovery, because I tell you, they are going to produce for you. And I believe that, I believe that. So yeah, that's a little part of my story.
Let's talk about Brené a little bit more. That feels like a natural. People that are listening to this podcast may not know who Brené Brown is. I encourage you to go look. In fact, I'll put a link to a couple of things into the show notes. A leader in leaders.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and she is in, well, I don't know if she uses the word recovery for herself. When she spoke, does she use the word I'm in recovery? Or how does she frame that? She doesn't drink anymore. I know that. She doesn't do drugs anymore, but she did, right?
Yeah. I think, what how she says, yeah, she definitely, I'm not sure if she qualifies it. I think one of the things that's great about Brene is that she tries to not qualify it, but and make that her identity. But one of the things that I loved, and she put this out right about, and maybe you can link this in your show notes too, but she put this out right when I was going through the Dare to Lead training with her and chairing that luncheon 5 years ago about, sobriety is her superpower.
Yeah.
Sobriety is her superpower. And she owes everything that she's had in her career to working a program. And the program can be different. There's 12-step programs, but there's also other programs. And she's really focused on this place between stimulus and response, and what my reaction is between stimulus and response. And in the recovery world, we call that the pause. And so I think her sharing her story, as I shared with her, it's really impactful. It's made a lot of people be able to own their story, and their stories may look different, right? It may look different than, it may not be recovery from alcoholism or addiction. It may be something else, but whatever that story is, giving people the courage to step inside that story and own it. And so yeah, I mean, she definitely attributes her success to getting sober so many years ago. I think she's celebrating 30 years. It might be 29. Can't quite remember, but it's been a long time. And, I think what's interesting about Brené's story is that, she didn't have like she didn't have a ton of external consequences, but she could foreshadow and see what was coming. And she thought, I want to get off this bus. I want to get off this train. And my family's riddled with addiction. And so, one of the things I take away from her is, right, and I've done this for myself. It's like, when we have the power to step inside our story, we get to write our own ending, you know, or the story controls us. And I take that to heart and continue to try and coach and lead people on that today.
Wonderful. So I want to say a couple things through there. So, you have this luncheon, you named Rob Lowe as one, and I'll put a link to the luncheon speakers because it's an impressive list. And for those that didn't pick up on it, this is a group of people that are coming to the stage, to a large group of people that are celebrities that are saying either I'm in recovery or I'm sober, or however they frame that up. I believe that having people like that step forward can have huge impact. And I'll define huge as even one person, right? That when, and if you, in your story too, you probably have moments where you heard about somebody who was sober, maybe when you were still drinking. I have those, and those were kind of irritating at the time, but it was part of this process for me. And so I really do believe in the power of recovering out loud, and how much impact those courageous people have when they hit the stage and share their story. So I would love to link that in the show notes, if that's cool, that link.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so what's your feel for my proposal just then? What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I mean, what I'm thinking about, Brett, is, the impact of one and the impact on one. We talked about that in at the council, and we just never know who we're going to impact. And if we can impact one person, the ripple becomes the wave. And to your point, we don't know what those data points are going to be, and who that person is going to come in our lives, and when they're going to come in. But we talk about planting a seed, right? This goes back, and I think it's biblical, planting a seed and then running with that. And you mentioned, I was still drinking when, I knew somebody that was sober. My story is a little different. I didn't know anyone who was sober when I was drinking. I mean, I thought I didn't see any like reason why you should stop drinking. I mean, it sounded like, bananas. Like, why would anybody quit drinking? I mean, I just couldn't fathom. But, the consequences in my life were starting to add up. And so, I started getting into action and doing, right? And so I, did did treatment, I did IOP, I did, 12-step meetings, I had a therapist. I mean, you name it, I had everything. And I still didn't really want to quit drinking. But I started hearing those messages, right? And when I heard other people's stories, it helped me connect to my story. And when I shared my story out loud, it helped me get clear on what I wanted. So when we talk about things, it's those data points. And so going back to your question, right? We have a room of 1,000 to 1,500 people who are invited by others. It's kind of it's a great thing. We've done it for 40 years here in Houston with speakers that you mentioned. And, people come because they just want to be a part of it and may not know anything about being in recovery, not know anyone that's in recovery. But what comes out of those conversations is, hey, my brother, hey, I have a daughter, those discussions and how can we get help? But you just never know the impact. And I can look back and think the impact of people. I would even, go so far to say as like the Salesforce crew that started the Salesforce sober group. I mean, I started connecting with them, having conversations with Marin Nelson. These are the impact of those discussions. And, back to what you were saying is like we get to do things from that, right? We get to build healthier communities. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, it does, yeah, and you spoke to it through a couple lenses there. One, before you're sober, right? Because and I love that you shared your truth about finding your way to your moment of change, right? And that along the way you'd done things, and you still weren't thinking there was there was a need to quit. I mean, which sounds like we're both alcohol centric folks. But yeah, I mean, and of course that's the same. And there's a power in what you just shared about, I'm really lucky that there's these organizations where these people coalesce and they tell their stories and they give me the opportunity to tell mine, to your point a minute ago, right? And we can't know who's being influenced by what at any given time. And, you've been around long enough, you've seen examples of something that really resonates with you, not resonating with somebody else. But this idea that it's possible, because it seemed like the Grand Canyon, and I'm Evel Knievel, right? I can't get this. I can't get over this canyon. This is impossible. I mean, I can think about it, but as soon as I let my mind wander into, well, what about Christmas? What about, I mean, these insignificant things, but there was a reason to stop me from getting that distance that I needed to get my brain healthy. And so when you hear these stories, Jamie Lee Curtis, I can't remember all the names that were on that list. Carrie Fisher's on there. There's a lot of people that are coming forward. And I would propose people like Marin, people like you, people like at Cisco in the corporate world, because that's where I'm hanging out these days, as you know.
Yep.
I think there's massive opportunity. And even for Brené to stand on the stage a moment ago, you shared that she's saying hire people that are in recovery. I know there's HR people that listen to this, right? And it's like there are examples that are underway. Salesforce, Cisco, UKG, others that are doing this kind of stuff to making it okay to talk about, okay to connect, okay to be different at the dinner party, right? Et cetera. And I'm just convinced that there's a wave happening here. I guess I'm segueing into corporate America a little bit through there. So
Yeah, love it.
that's a lot. Anything resonate there that you'd like to?
Oh yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
The numbers, and I'm sure I have old data, but the number that I always land on is, 70% of people in active addiction are employed and they're working in our organizations. And, you know, some of them want some help. Some of them don't, right? But, another thing I think about is as leaders, being able to identify some erratic behavior, is that's kind of key. And they're here and we sweep that under the rug. We're just not talking about it enough. I'm super grateful that I work for an organization that was behind, getting this up and running, and an advocate of having something here, although we need to do more, and it's, what we're trying to do more with that in corporate America. I think that's one of my next focuses. I mean, trying here in Houston to get, we have some big corporations here that have focus on, Chevron's one, they have a substance abuse, wellness team. I mean, they're really focused on that. They're pretty supportive. Halliburton's another one. There are organizations here, but I want to see it happen more. I want to see it happen more inside my organization. I always just tell people I have a day job, and so it's time and getting people to dedicate to that. But I'm so glad to see more people talking about it, right? Because it does make a difference. And, one of the interesting things is that, at this luncheon, it really is, there's a lot of really, Houston is unique in this organization, by the way. I wish every, major city had a council on recovery and did these speaker series, but we seem to be pretty unique in this arena. But somebody says, when I see Brené get on stage, or when I see, the president of this organization, this major corporation get up on stage and, share their story, like maybe that's me. Maybe I can do that. It is huge impact. And I told a gentleman here in town, and I'm not going to give up his name, but I told him one day, as part of nonprofits, you're always looking to raise money. And I told him, I go, I don't want your money. I'll take it, right? I'm not going to turn it down, but I don't want your money. You sharing your story and this person's super open about their recovery, but you sharing your story has more impact than you realize, right? Because of the position that you hold in this community and in this business world. And so, the more people we can do, I just think we're just at the beginning, though,
Totally agree. And I agree with your assessment too of the power of one person's story and one person's willingness to be out there with it. And I'm gonna circle back on a couple stats just because this is a good spot in case I'm hoping to attract more HR folks. So I'm hoping some HR
Yeah.
folks are listening. Like you just dropped a stat that I think is really, really cool. But not cool. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but this idea that we've got, 70% of people with substance use disorder, and I'm using those words intentionally because I don't want to label somebody an addict or an alcoholic or anything else. That it can have varying degrees, but medically speaking, they're in the zone of danger. 70% of them are in the company. So I look at companies that are doing so many great things, right? Great teams of people that are setting up mindfulness sessions, yoga sessions, right? They're doing mental health sessions. But the stealthy little thing that is just now making an appearance is this idea of recovery, sobriety, and this disease that is affecting people and their families. So we're talking about employees and their families. And yet it has been my observation that it's just not there. And it's because of shame and stigma. So I'm going to get to this. I'm circling back on this. When a leader, somebody with a little bit of influence, steps up and says, "I'm in recovery," I'm one of 24 million, as a matter of fact, in the United States. The impact can be so significant And in my personal experience, which isn't, necessarily a model of the entirety of corporate America, but in my little world where I stepped up, a very small voice, the only voice in a company as large as Cisco. And what happened when I started, and what happened as far as people reaching out to me, and the number of times I would hear from people, that were in their own journeys, but that it had become something that could be talked about. And then I'll just conclude with this and hand it back to you is, I of course I'm still tight with the people inside Cisco because that's important to me, even though I don't work there anymore. And, I made some waves with the events team as well. And they're doing some things with this next event that's coming up this week around sober spaces, sober events. That's Martian 2 years ago. That's another planet 2 years ago. And all these people are excited about it. And I'm just thinking, well, that's a nice win. How much more winning is there to be done everywhere? Okay, that's enough out of me. Please.
Yeah, no, I love it. And yeah, I mean, to see the work and we're out there. And I was just, as you were sharing, Brett, I was thinking, oh, I need to reach out to somebody that reached out to me, right? Because it's out there, right? It's out there on our intranet. Last week, it was interesting. I had two people reach out and say, hey, I saw there's a story about me on UKG today. And I mean, it's a little dated, right? It was from about 4 years ago, but people are still coming across that. It's my understanding we were at one point talking about it in new hires, but it made me realize you know, to reach back out to some of those people to have conversations and see how they're doing, because it's just important. And, if we go back to the vulnerability piece and the shame and stigma, right? It's so deep. It's so deep that, if somebody has the courage to reach out, I want to take the time to give them the space, whatever that space is that I need. That's, the most important thing that I do today is give people the space on that. And, you know, I'll add around the shame and stigma. I mean, it's still there, it's still there, and a lot, we're having these conversations, but, externally it's a little bit different, and trying to break that. I will say though, excuse me, in June, we had an event at UKG, and the marketing team, it was a women in leadership team, and we were in Austin, and they had like tonight's mocktail. So I feel like, and I was so grateful for the events team to do that. Now, the challenge is, walking up to the bar with somebody, and I'm like super excited about this mocktail option, and, the bartender's like, I recommend the mocktail with some form of bourbon or some, the person next to me is like, yo, yeah, put that in there. This looks really good, but I'm not going to have this without alcohol, which, is okay too, because that was me. That was me. And so, but just giving those options is huge headway. We'll see what comes up. I mean, it's like, I'd love to see a group at our client conferences, that are focused. But, that one little step, you mentioned something earlier, you would have never seen a few years ago, right? You would have never seen a few years ago. So, and, reality is, there's 24 million people in recovery, but there's a lot of other people who don't drink for whatever reason. And we just like, and that I had to learn in recovery too, because I didn't know that. I thought and if you didn't drink, I thought it was weird. And so, I think, those little things, they're making waves.
Yeah. No, there's no doubt. And so I'd like to add something at this point, this idea of shame being toxic, and this idea that that woman that's there with you having bourbon in it, the last thing I wanted her to do is feel shameful, right? Because if I come at this from the standpoint of shame, now I'm doing the opposite. I'm trying to engender belonging and inclusion. And now if I'm shaming people or making them feel bad because they want to get their drink on, that's none of my business. And I think it's fine. I think the whole thing is that we're waking up to this idea that these events, these comings together of people when they want to make connection, historically, I'm from the 80s and I am Gen X, right? So we that's what we did, right? And so it seems foreign to not have that be the centerpiece. That's how you loosen up, et cetera. But to your point, there's other people that are walking around that are not drinking for religious reasons, for health reasons, or whatever else. And the stats are that, Gen Z and millennials, they're not as interested in those kinds of events. And so you talk about it from a corporate standpoint and attraction and keeping talent around, there's just winning to be done. But to circle back, it can't be a shame approach. It can't be, we're here to take away your whatever the heck it is. Instead, it's an awareness that people like me, if I have that little bit of bourbon, I don't know what happens, but likely it turns into a year or two of every night again, because I've seen enough stories that have proved that to me, that I'm maintaining and I'm protecting my sobriety. And that's an awareness that I think a lot of people, like I used to do, come on, everybody, let's have a drink.
Yeah.
Like if you don't have that awareness that this could potentially take somebody down a very, very bad road or continue it, it just doesn't give anybody the opportunity to set themselves up to protect their fellow coworkers, et cetera, when they don't have that knowledge. So over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that too. And it's like, the little bit deeper you're in recovery. I mean, now it's like, I told that woman, I'm like, yeah, you should get that in there, I still, my mind's still a little bit focused. But what I'm thinking about, Brett, is just like, when we talk about belonging, it's like respect where others are at, and have opportunities, right? Like, the opportunity for me to get something besides a glass of ice water when everybody's having a celebratory beverage. I can have a celebratory beverage too. It just looks different than yours. And I do that, right? Like I don't drink those high sugary mocktails just for the kicks, like it's normally when it's a celebratory thing. And respecting others, letting people be who they are, but also understanding, to your point, like alcohol has different effects on different people. And it's, to me, it's it's not about the alcohol, right? It is about the belonging and connection that we're trying to build in the world today, whether that be in our communities or in corporate America, right? When we do things together, we are better together and we get more done and we have bigger impact. We help people be successful. And, that starts with giving people a space to do that. And so, yeah, like, I mean, I always say, like, I'm not the drinking police. And, the first year is a little rough, right? The first year is a little rough. You're like, how do I navigate these events and how do I do that? And I'm going to go, it is, for me, it was a little rough. I'll say that. But now, today, people are like, how do you have all those dinners? I'm like, I go to the dinners and I let people order whatever they want to order. And then I pick up the bill. It's like it's simple, right? But, when you were in that all the time, you can't fathom how that's different today, but yeah, it's a non-issue today for me. Like those events, all of that stuff, a non-issue. I have an event and a dinner tonight and it'll be just fine. I'll let them order whatever they want and I'll order, a Perrier.
Bubble water for the win.
So,
Yeah, that
yeah.
and in that scenario too, I'd love to just add a little bit of hope and joy into that, just a little bit here in that, and I'm going to propose that this is how I feel. So that same scenario, I get up and I go to my car and I put the key in the lock or I unlock the door and I get behind that driver's wheel and I feel fine about it. And I don't know about you, but I have these little blasts of gratitude or amazement that I'm capable of these things, I go home and I decide to go to sleep. I decide to, I'm tired and I'm going to go to sleep. That didn't happen for me for years.
Mm-mm.
Um,
Mm-mm.
and so I go to a concert now, which was scary. To your point, that first year, it's like, how am I going to do this? What's going to happen here? Not that I was going to drink because I felt good there, but how can I have fun? Let's test it.
Yeah.
And it turns out that the world wasn't drinking like I was drinking, for starters, right?
Right, right.
And second, there's all these small but profound gains that occur that are not, I'm like you, I'm 11 years sober, and it's still not lost on me, Amanda. I go like, what is this? I'm I'm sitting here feeling fine, and it's okay. So I love that you're having a dinner tonight. I love that you're going to have Perrier. I just, and they'll have their whatever the heck, and that's fine too, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think, some of the things you said around, like, I mean, what I've landed on in recovery is I get to do a lot of things. I mean, I really enjoy my job. We're going through a bunch of changes, and I really love, like, I'm excited about these changes. I love my job. I get to do nonprofit work that I'm passionate about, and connect with my friends, take care of the grandbabies, and I get to do that because I'm sober. I don't feel bad when I wake up in the morning. And that's the other thing. It's like, I think about, you know I the other thing I say is quitting drinking was the best health decision I've ever made. And I didn't make it for a health decision, right? I made it because if I kept drinking, I would die. But it's the best health decision that I've ever made. And I get to do all these things really because I keep recovery front and center. It frees up so much space for life and getting to enjoy the life. I'm looking at your guitars, right? Like, and thinking about concerts, and, I get to go to concerts and truly experience them. I'm lucky if I remembered them when I was drinking.
Totally. Yeah, these are those small and yet profound gifts, and once again, to share with people, because I know I'll get people that are, on their own journey, right? They'll listen to this, and again, it seemed like the Grand Canyon to me, right? But where we sit now, and I'll speak for myself, to not have all that craving and all that crap in my head all the time about planning my next drink or how I'm gonna, hide the last drink, or how there was so much work involved. And, it's been said before, there's a kind of freedom. And I love that word in this context. Like there's freedom to go and do things and be available. Somebody could call me and pick them up at the airport at 7 o'clock tonight, and I can do that.
Yeah, yeah. What do you know?
That used to be something I couldn't do. Right. And I'm just telling on myself and giving a snapshot that somebody maybe listening goes, oh yeah, that's, that I know what you're talking about there. Because the thing is that it's common and it's treatable. And it, on the other side, again, I'm speaking for myself, it works out. You get to do things. You get to engage in life. I get to become a human again.
Yeah, 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 for sure. I mean, I really relate to you know, like, it is a superpower. It's made me better in every aspect of my life, right? And I didn't think that, again, I wanted to get rid of some consequences when I got here. I wanted people to stop think I drank too much, or I wanted to, personally, I wanted to be able to drink 2 glasses of wine, but that just never really happened. That's what I wanted when I got here. And what I've been given is and received over and over is so many gifts. And it's opened up my life in so many areas that I get to experience and learn from and connect with other people. I don't know. I highly recommend it. Although it wasn't all that fun at first, I always say, like, I was pissed off the whole time. Like, I didn't want any part of it. But you stick around long enough, and then, looking back, I needed every bit of that. And then, really focusing on, can we just show one man or woman, one other person out there that their life, if they think they have a problem with a substance, alcohol, or anything else, there is a solution, and life can get better.
Thank you, Amanda. Great conversation. I really dug talking about recovery through the lens of Dare to Lead and Brené Brown's work. And that's sort of where we ended up, which was super cool. It's such an important element to why I started doing this. Also, thank you for the work you're doing at UKG and standing up a group inside of a large company like that. A lot of companies are doing it. It's cool. It's a movement. I'm convinced we're at a tipping point. And also thank you for the work you do at the Council on Recovery. There'll be links in the show notes. Until next time, thank you very much. Take care, everyone.